much for all of that background. Let's talk more about the numbers and so much more with Chief Strategist and Communications Director for the Republican National Committee, Sean Spicer. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Allison.
All right, let's talk about these hot off the presses new CNN ORC polls. The first one is President Obama's approval rating. He is now at 49%. His disapproval is at 47%. And let's look at this in historical context, because it's always interesting to see where other presidents were at this point in their terms. So, as we said, President Obama is at 49%. At this point, President Bush, George W., was at 36%. Bill Clinton at this point was at 61%. Ronald Reagan exactly matched where Barack Obama is now at 49%. Do you agree with the Democrats that 49% for Barack Obama means this is good news for Hillary Clinton?
Unfortunately, I don't. I think because of the other part of the poll that you guys talked about, whether it's the economy or foreign policy, at the end of the day, if people believe that Hillary Clinton's going to be a third term of Barack Obama and the economy's not doing well, or at least people don't think it's doing well, and people are very concerned about what's happening with our foreign policy, I don't really know how you can run as the third term when people don't like the policies of the current administration.
This just in, and I'm not kidding, Sean, we're just hearing that President Obama just moments ago, because he's on his trip to, I believe, Ethiopia today, and he was just asked about these numbers, and he said that he believes if he were to run again, he could win. What's your response?
Well, we have a constitution that's not going to allow that to happen.
But do you think that he is popular enough, now that the numbers are 49% of approval, that it means that a third Obama term would be okay with the American people?
No, I don't, because at the end of the day, I mean, look, whether it is the economy or the foreign policy, neither one of those will hold water. I think the Obama campaign last cycle was phenomenal. They did a great job on the ground. They did a great job with digital. Fortunately, we've been able to catch up. And I think when it comes down to, when you look at last cycle, Mitt Romney won in the exit polls on all of the key policy questions. I think we fell short on the ground and on data. And I think we've now leapfrogged the Democrats on that, and we're well prepared coming into 2016.
Let's talk about the first debate, the first Republican debate that's going to be happening a week from now. And as we understand it, there's going to be some number crunching. So the most recent 5 polls are all going to be crunched together, and the top 10 GOP candidates are going to be chosen to appear on that debate stage. Are you getting pressure from the lower tier candidates who say that's not a fair setup?
I wouldn't say pressure, but anybody who's in 15th or 16th place wants to be in first or second. So, of course, there's going to be some grumbling at the bottom. But again, I will go back to statements that I've made earlier, which is I think both Fox and CNN have not just included the top 10, which is a historical high in terms of the number of people that have ever been on a debate stage, but both Fox and CNN have gone the extra step and said we will have a second debate for those who are not in the top 10 but in the top 16. And I think that's important. So historically, those people may have gotten no voice because they weren't polling high enough to get on the stage. I think what you've seen this cycle is in the first 2 debates an opportunity for anybody who's in the top 16 to really get on a debate stage, have their voice heard. And I actually really applaud both networks for going that extra step.
Sean, tell us what's happening behind the scenes. Are some of the GOP candidates telling you that they think that Donald Trump is sucking some of the oxygen out of the room for them?
No, they're not going to say that to me or to anyone here. I think each one of them is trying to run their own campaign. The reality of any campaign is you look at the players on the board, you figure out a strategy, and you figure out how you get your candidate to move further up. So I think they're probably having those decisions or those conversations inside, but not just with Donald Trump, but with other candidates, right? They're trying to say, okay, if so-and-so were to drop out, or if I could surge ahead of this particular candidate, then I could move up. So I think it's a much more holistic, strategic discussion that's happening within each campaign.
Sean, what do you think about the rhetoric? We had 2 pundits, more than 2 actually, on this morning on New Day, who say that this rhetoric is more inflammatory this season than they've ever heard before.
Well, I don't think that they studied well in high school then, because if you look back in the 1800s, there was some pretty divisive rhetoric that was spewed back then. That being said, look, I think that as far as Republicans go, and I'm going to echo the sentiments of my boss, Reince Priebus, who's talked about invoking Reagan's 11th commandment. I think when it comes to Republican on Republican, we've got to remember that the focus has got to be November of next year, winning the White House and keeping Hillary Clinton out. And that being said, name-calling amongst each other is not productive. And while it may have some kind of short benefit, I think all of the candidates need to focus on talking about themselves. Yes, in a primary, you're always going to distinguish your policies, your experience from the other folks. That's fine. That's part of the process. But the name calling, I think, has to go away.
Donald Trump was on television last night, and he was talking about a third-party run and basically saying that he would only consider it if the Republican establishment, you in the RNC, don't play nicely with him. Let me play for you what he had to say about this.
If I'm treated fairly and I get a good fair shot at this and I'm not, being sabotaged with all sorts of nonsense and a lot of phony ads and they throw a lot of money into it and, they'll do ads that are all false and, this and that. If I get a good shot, a fair shot at it, I would have no interest in doing that whatsoever. All I want to do is be treated fairly. And I will say over the last week or so, Reince and the whole group, they've treated us very fairly.
Sean? What do you think about him saying that if you play nice with him, he won't have a third-party run?
Well, it's not just him. I think we're going to play nicely with every candidate. We treat all of them equally and all of them fairly. That's our job. And I know a lot of times people want us to tip the scales one way or another, but we don't carve a candidate in or carve a candidate out. I think that's what's beautiful about our party in particular. We believe in sort of the free market, not just in the marketplace, but also within our candidates. They all run. They make their cases to the voters. And to the victor go the spoils.
But we have heard,
but
Sean, let me just push back for a second, because we have heard that Reince Priebus did make a phone call, or at least had a conversation with Donald Trump, telling him to just back it down a little bit.
Well, look, Reince has conversations with every candidate. Not all of them become public, and for the most part, we try to keep all of those conversations. But that's not unique. We talk to the campaigns and the candidates, to all of these people. And in some cases, we talk to them about what the party's doing, what we believe is in the best interest of the party, how we look towards the general election, and some of the things that may be helpful, whether it's in the data or the ground game or, yes, the messaging and the tone. So we do talk to all of them. I think that particular conversation leaked out, and it was unfortunate. But at the end of the day, do we counsel all of our candidates and talk to them about what we're doing as a party to be prepared for the eventual nominee and win? Absolutely.
Let's talk about the message of another GOP candidate, and that is Governor Mike Huckabee. He was just on another morning show, and he was asked about his, some say, inflammatory comments about the Iran nuclear deal and how dangerous he considers that deal. He did not back down. In fact, he further expounded on it. Listen to this.
As President of the United States, would you use the words, march the Israelis to the door of the oven?
Yes, I would. And let me tell you why. Because I have been to Auschwitz 3 times. I have stood at that very place. I've been to Israel dozens of times. My first trip there was 42 years ago. The one thing I am absolutely assured of is that for 6,000 years, Jews have been hunted down. And the last time the world did not take seriously threats against the Jewish people, just before World War II, this ended up in the murder of 6 million Jews.
Sean, are you comfortable with that Holocaust language being used?
Well, I think, again, as we go back to this idea of being treated fairly that you asked a minute ago, our job is not to sit here and call balls and strikes and talk about, well, you shouldn't talk about this policy in a particular way, or you shouldn't describe it. Governor Huckabee made his comments. He clearly then articulated why he made them, just with the clip that you just made, and they should speak for themselves. I mean, it's not my job or the RNC's job to get in the middle and say, you shouldn't talk about this way or this that way. We'll have particular conversations about what's in the best interest of the party privately, but we're not going to sit here and condemn someone for how they talk about a particular policy.
But do you feel that the rhetoric has been ratcheted up because people have been using fairly inflammatory language already, that now to outdo each other, candidates keep upping the ante?
Now, I think, again, it doesn't take more than a simple Internet search to realize that we've had this kind of discourse in this country for a long time in terms of the rhetoric and the name-calling. Sometimes the name-calling is inappropriate. Again, we believe that it's helpful to focus on talking positively about what our policies are and contrasting ourselves with Hillary Clinton and why she's untrustworthy. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and start to call balls and strikes on any of these individual candidates.
Sean, it's already been an interesting race, and it's only going to get more so. We look forward to next week's debate, and thanks so much for being on.
I do too.
Great. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Allison.